Now, top story this morning, we're asking if the UK is becoming more divided than ever over Israel's war on Hamas. The Prime Minister's message is that the country stands united with Israel.
OK, there are increasing numbers turning out for pro-Palestinian protests. They stretch police resources, while Rebel, Conservative and Labour MPs are demanding a ceasefire and paying the penalty for it. For instance, it's cost an MP his job. That man there, Paul Bristow, he demanded a full ceasefire, saying we're not consistent.
Well, Downing Street saying it was not consistent with the principles of collective responsibility. That's what he was accused of. But he was objecting to collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Well, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has rejected calls for any ceasefire in Gaza, saying it would amount to a surrender to Hamas. And he cited the Bible, saying this is a time for war.
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
The charity UNICEF says 420 children are being injured or killed in Gaza every day because of the bombing.
Well, let's go to our security editor, Mark White, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Look, lots of lines coming out of sort of politics here in the UK. But in terms of where you are, the big developments have been the release of this female Israeli soldier and also the footage by Hamas of 3 further female hostages in Gaza.
Yes, indeed. The release, or rescue, I should say, of Corporal Ori Megafeet couldn't have come at a better time, I think, for the Israeli government, because just hours earlier we had the release by Hamas. It was expected, the release of hostage videos as part of Hamas's propaganda war, and sure enough, it came with the release of that hostage video showing 3 women. One of the women actually quite critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and the comments that she was saying, and asking for a ceasefire. But I think there's no doubt, of course, these women are speaking under extreme duress, and you've got to take that into account with anything that they say. But that video, of course, was in terms of the Israeli public, further proof for those that believe there should be a pause in the ground war to allow the hostage negotiations to continue. So I think the news that the Israeli government could deliver that this corporal had been rescued after being abducted by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October was enough for the Prime Minister in his news address last night to say to the people, look, you know, there are no perfect solutions here, but we have taken the determination that those hostage negotiations had stalled in terms of the negotiations that were taking place between the Qatari government and those Hamas terrorists, and that all they were doing was playing for time. And that the important thing to do is to push ahead with this ground war. And in doing that, he says they are still absolutely fixed on trying to release those hostages, and it can be done with the release or rescue of Corporal Megafeet.
OK, Mark White with that. Thanks very much indeed.
Sense now on how things are taking place domestically. The Labour MP Andy MacDonald has been suspended by Keir Starmer. His sin was saying between the river and the sea, as he made a speech urging peace between Israelis and Palestinians at a recent rally. I don't even know what that means, but anyway.
Well, it's deemed a highly
provocative
song and refers to wiping out everybody between the River Jordan and the sea. Yes, so it's very
well,
offensive.
either we explain that or don't repeat that again. Conservative MP Paul Bristow has been sacked by the Prime Minister from his job after publicly urging Rishi Sunak to push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Let's get the latest on this from GB News Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood. Paul Bristow, first of all, sacked from his job after he broke ranks. OK.
Yes, Paul Bristow, Member of Parliament for Peterborough since 2019, seen as a Boris Johnson loyalist, someone that you wouldn't expect to be on the sort of more radical side of the party on this issue, has called for a permanent ceasefire in local press. And Rishi Sunak took very quick and decisive action in terms of sacking him from his relatively junior parliamentary private secretary role, which is interesting because the Labour Party has seen a huge number of shadow ministers say much the same thing against the line. And we must remember that the Conservative Party and the Labour Party leadership have the same line here, which is not calling for a permanent ceasefire. They think that that would only give Hamas time to rearm, regroup and commit another massacre of Jews as we saw 3 weeks ago. The line from both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak is for a humanitarian pause, to allow humanitarian aid in, to allow corridors for safe refugee removal and all the rest of it. But calling for a ceasefire seems to go beyond that line. Paul Bristow is the only shadow Conservative minister the only Conservative minister who has said something like that. He's had his position taken off him. Whereas in the Labour Party, 7 shadow ministers have broken ranks and called for this permanent ceasefire, and yet none of them have have been removed from their shadow ministerial position. And so that's a bit of a dividing line that has now broken out between the iron discipline that Rishi Sunak wants to present in the Conservative Party and perhaps the more divisions that we're seeing in the Labour Party. And then on top of that, we get this second issue today, or yesterday, of Andy MacDonald, the MP for Middlesbrough, who used this phrase, river to the sea. Now, the common refrain of river to the sea is, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. And when people chant that at rallies, many Jewish people feel that means wiping out the state of Israel from the face of the earth. And so many people feel that using that phrase, river to the sea, has all of these connotations of anti-Semitism.
That wasn't the context he was using it in, to be clear.
He didn't use it specifically. He didn't use the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. But he used the phrase, from the river to the sea. And so many people took that from that, the context of the wider phrase. But of course, he denies that. He would say that he was just using it in the context of wanting there to be peace between Israelis and Palestinians. But Keir Starmer clearly has taken a line on this, perhaps because he hasn't taken a line on those 7 shadow ministers, and also Anas Sarwar, the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, all of whom who have broken ranks with Keir Starmer on the issue of the ceasefire. Perhaps because Keir Starmer has felt he can't move with the divisions over the position on the ceasefire, he has moved on Andy MacDonald and this chant, from the river to the sea.
Mm-hmm. And just to let you guys at home listening and viewing, where do you stand on a pause in hostilities or a ceasefire?